Hello. In this video, we'll talk about successful intercultural communication. Actually, that will be the final video for our course in intercultural communication. So, for this, we will at first do some revision, then we'll find out what successful intercultural communication is, and finally, I will give you some tips for successful communication. So you remember that we started to talk with the culture and how culture is not really visible to us, and what are the other aspects that make this culture so special, or any culture so special. So later we talked about the cultural dimensions, and with the cultural dimensions, with understanding the cultural dimensions, we started understanding how different the cultures are in many aspects. They are relations in a group, attitude to time, and language. So that is very important, so that we could understand that communication is not just a talk. Communication can be verbal, and communication can be non-verbal, and very much our communication is based on what our cultural dimensions are, like what the dimensions of the culture that we belong to are. So according to this, we can think of high context cultures and low context cultures. And low context cultures are the cultures where we give more meaning with words. Unlike low context cultures, high context cultures rely more from non-verbal means of communication. And in our previous lecture, we talked about some historical factors and religious factors that also influence high and low context of cultures. And we talked about the cultural dimensions that can really be important when we talk about such moments as distinctions between in and out groups, and how it influences communication, the bonds between people, which is individual and collectivism. So then the level of commitment to relationship, which is masculinity and femininity, and the attitude to time. So altogether, it allows us to see communication as the process where the context can be high and low, and because of this, there are different levels of uncertainty avoidance and directness and indirectness. We discussed it in our previous lecture. So here, we also can add the important aspects of communication, which are small and deep talk and understatement, as one of the features of the English language. Small talk is the talk, is really a small talk when you want to get acquainted with the person, to please the person, to start the conversation. While understatement is a suggestion or a hint that is hidden in what people say. So today here we will also add one more important part of communication. These are stereotypes that influence communication. You have to understand that each nation has stereotypes about another nation, or each culture has stereotypes about different cultures, and it's neither good nor bad. However, when these stereotypes hamper our communication, it really may ruin the success of it. So let's look at the barriers that can be in intercultural communication. First of all, they are linguistic, and you understand it much depends upon how we know the language. Then they are cultural. These are our cultural dimensions, our attitudes, values, beliefs. They are perceptual, how we stereotype other nations. Experiential, what experience we have already had with other cultures. Physical preferences, non-verbal communication, personal space, use of time, our comfort needs, and so on. And finally, how we express and manage our emotions. So altogether, these are the factors that can either ruin or make your communication very successful. So let's look how people communicate across cultures using the dimensions that we have already talked about. People from individualistic cultures tend to be more direct, while collectivist cultures are more indirect, emphasizing group consensus and harmony. Monochronic people are more punctual and focused on time, while polychronic can have more fluid communication because relationship is really important for them. People from masculine cultures can prioritize directness because they value achievement, while people from feminine cultures will be focused on indirectness, harmony, and empathy because, again, they value the quality of life. Altogether, these factors will bring us to high and low context cultures. Again, we just talked about it. It is much upon how the information is conveyed. In low context, it is conveyed explicitly, while in high context, it is conveyed implicitly. We need to understand the cultural nuances and many, many other factors. So now let's do the tips. What do we do to engage in intercultural communication while we are able to understand the dimensions, to understand our stereotypes, and to understand whether it's the high or the low context culture? So we, first of all, we understand the dimensions because it helps us to understand the communication styles. And that is how we will consider the preferences and the expectations of other cultures. With this, we need to add respect and openness, because only respect to other cultures can make communication better. And respect and openness is another side of flexibility. You need to be flexible in your styles and not to stick to the only style that you have learned through your culture, but you need to adapt to diverse cultural norms and preferences. And the final important point here is empathy and patience. Of course, there are the gaps between the cultures, so we need to bridge them and navigate potential misunderstanding. So let's conclude. For being successful, we need to recognize cultural variables to understand how these variables influence our business and our work, to be able to maximize intercultural communication strengths and minimize potential difficulties, and to increase cultural sensitivity. So let's come to the conclusion. and the final thoughts. First of all, cultural awareness. You have to be aware of the biases, of the stereotypes. You have to be aware of cultural dimensions, and you really need to understand this level of communication: high, low, intermediate. So anything connected with how much you can express with the words. Active listening can much help you in this. When you listen actively and attentively, you will be able to understand the tone, the nonverbal cues, and emotions and context. Of course, again, stereotypes. Don't avoid making stereotypes and making assumptions based on stereotypes. Ask questions, seek clarification, and it will help you to understand your communicator much better. We talked about respect and open-mindedness. It's about the same, like appreciate different ways of thinking. Don't believe that your way of thinking is the only way possible, and adjust what you say to what your communicators, what your interlocutors would like to hear. Be respectful, listen, be more attentive than you usually are with the people from your own culture. Ask for the clarity, use simple and straightforward language, convey your message effectively. If you are in a high context culture, it doesn't mean that you don't have to express your message effectively, because words really matter in intercultural communication. So think of the feedback. So ask them for the feedback and ask them for the confirmation. And build your relationship based on the mutual trust. And of course, don't allow any stereotypes, taboos, and like bad ideas about other cultures hamper your communication. So good luck in your intercultural communication, and I hope this course was helpful. Bye-bye.